Hey, today we are going to begin a new message series entitled My Big Mouth. And I want to give you some very practical steps to building strong, healthy relationships. But before we begin, I want you to say the title with me, okay? So, everybody, I know you're in the car, I know you're at home. It may seem a little strange, but go ahead and say the title with me. Ready? My Big Mouth. We're focused on me, It's my big mouth, not our mother-in-law's big mouth, not our boss's big mouth, not our spouse's big mouth. It's me and my big mouth. And before you turn me off, before you turn the volume down, I want to give you the bottom line. All right, and this is a game changer. If you can remember just this one statement, it will change your relationships. You ready? Quick to listen and slow to speak. And now I want to put some hand motions to this. We do this in the Early Learning Center because hand motions actually aids retention. So you ready for this? As we say, quick to listen and slow to speak, I want you to make fists and go quick to listen and slow to speak. Everybody, I know it seems strange, but quick to listen and slow to speak. Because the truth is, whenever you're in conflict, whenever you're bumping heads with someone, we have a tendency to close up, don't we? I mean, our muscles tense up, our heart rate and our blood pressure increases, our breathing respirations increase, and we become defensive. Whenever you are in conflict, whenever you have high levels of arousal, it becomes difficult for us to concentrate. And the truth is, we do not remember details clearly. If you ever think about it, when you're in conflict, we all have this revisionist history that goes on, don't we? Where we rewrite history so it suits us. See, when you're in conflict, your attention narrows. You're like a fighter pilot. You get locked in on your target, the target of your anger. And soon, you pay attention to nothing else. You're ready to fight. I mean, I've been there. Maybe you've experienced this. You're having an argument with your loved one. I know it's a heated discussion with your loved one. And I know what to do to stop the argument. I know what to say. But at times, when you become emotionally charged, it's almost like you want to fight? You want to argue? Okay, let's fight. And then you're off to the races. And my friends, when that happens, when arguments become heated, when emotions begin to escalate, is when we say things and do things that are extremely destructive. Have you ever heard that old saying, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt me? It's a lie. It's a lie. I mean, our words hold great power, and it can take a long time for hurtful, destructive words to heal. And the truth is, whenever you're in conflict, both parties want the same thing. We want the same thing during conflict. We want to be heard and understood. We want to be heard and understood. And the truth is, we may never agree, right? We may never be able to solve the problem. You may never agree, but please just listen to me. And that's all we want. And so quick to listen and slow to speak. So I want to share with you some very practical application, okay? I'm going to get into the weeds here just a little bit, but you can see the slides. This is called the speaker-listener technique. Counselors across the world use this technique in order to increase communication skills. All right, it's called the speaker-listener technique. And I want to share with you rules for both parties. This is a rule for the speaker and a rule for the listener. All right, so one, the speaker has the floor. Okay, and you use an object. It can be a remote control. It can be a pen or a pencil. Just you hold something in your hand, and that designates the speaker. All right, so the speaker has the floor. You share the floor, and you don't problem solve. During this whole exercise, the focus is on having a good discussion, not on finding a solution. So here are the rules for the speaker. Okay, speak for yourself. Don't try to read your partner's mind because, quite frankly, you're wrong. And you express your thoughts and your feelings using these I statements, right? I feel upset when this takes place, or I feel angry, all right? Secondly, be brief. Okay, don't go on and on and on. You'll have plenty of time to talk about everything that's on your mind. Okay, and you need to take turns. And thirdly, for the speaker, stop and let the listener paraphrase. After you've spoken for a short while, just like 3-4 sentences at the max, you stop and let the listener paraphrase. And if they paraphrase incorrectly, they didn't get what you said, well then gently, you got that, gently correct them and have politely reinstate what it is that you tried to say. And then for the listener, okay, you're paraphrasing what you hear. You're simply repeating back in your own words what your partner stated. You want to let them know that you hear and that you understand what they're saying. And then you wait for your turn to speak and to ask more questions. So for the listener, you're focusing on the speaker's message. You're not developing a response. You're not rebutting. You simply listen and understand what your partner is saying. Wait for your turn to speak. It's coming, right? And then you share the floor. You know, that quick to listen and slow to speak, you know, I didn't come up with that on my own. It's plagiarized, right? From James chapter 1. Now, remember James? Okay, James, he had a pretty famous big brother. He was the brother of Jesus. And James, what's amazing about James is James was slow to believe that Jesus was the Messiah. In fact, when Jesus was preaching and teaching his earthly ministry, James did not accept him as being the Messiah. I always joke around, do you know what I would have to do in order for my siblings to believe that I was God? I mean, do you know what I would have to do for them to believe that I was the Messiah? Well, James was a little slow. It wasn't until he saw his brother crucified upon a cross, placed in a tomb, and then 3 days later he rose again. I mean, a resurrection has a tendency to do that, right? It wasn't until after the resurrection that James believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And after the resurrection, James became a leader in the church in Jerusalem. In fact, he even had a nickname. His nickname was James the Just, J-U-S-T. St. Paul in Galatians chapter 2 says this about James, that he was an esteemed leader, that he was a pillar of the church. And so James, after the resurrection, he's leading the church in Jerusalem. And then all of a sudden, a new high priest takes the throne, right? His name was Ananus. And what happened was Festus, who was the Roman governor, Festus died. And while they were waiting for a new Roman governor to show up, Annas, the high priest, decided to exercise some authority. Now, Annas was a Sadducee. Remember, the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. Okay, remember, they were sad, you see, because they did not believe in the resurrection. And so James is walking around, he's preaching and teaching about the resurrection of Jesus, about the resurrection of all believers, right? And so Annas doesn't like this. And because there is no Roman governor, he gets all the Sanhedrin together and they have James condemned to death. Once again, they didn't have the authority to do it. So he overstepped his authority. And in 62 AD, James, the brother of Jesus, was stoned to death. Now, it's interesting because they found an ossuary in Jerusalem. An ossuary is, they reuse the graves in Jerusalem. And so they would clean out the bones and they put them in like this mini casket. That's called an ossuary. And in this ossuary, on the side is engraved, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. They actually have his bones. Anyway, James James chapter 1, verse 19 says this, "My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen." Now, he says, my dear brothers, take note. In other words, pay attention. Sit up straight. If you're taking notes, take note, because this is important. And who's he talking to? He says, everyone, right? This is all of us. Everyone should be quick to listen. Now, that doesn't even make sense. I mean, how is someone quick to listen? What he's saying is, this is of primary importance. This is the number one thing I want you to do. Be quick. Make it a priority to listen. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak. Okay, in other words, wait. Wait and be late before you speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. And I would even throw in there, and be curious. If you're going to speak, ask open-ended questions. And I know some of you are thinking, yeah, but that's like the snowball effect. A snowball starts rolling down a hill and it's getting bigger and bigger and it's getting faster and faster. And I know many of you are thinking, yeah, but if I ask open-ended questions, we're going to go right down the rabbit hole because this whole conversation is going to take off. And I would say, yes, ask those open-ended questions. Be curious. You see, I'll maintain that so often we jump to hasty, misinformed, relationally destructive conclusions because we don't take the time to listen. I mean, we're always on the move, and we move so quickly in our culture. We've got so many places to be, so many things to do that we don't take the time to listen. And what James is telling us is the longer you listen, the more you'll learn, the less angry you will become. One of my sayings is, the people we love the most, we often hurt the easiest. And I know you're thinking, thank you, Captain Obvious. I know, but the people we love the most are often the ones we hurt the easiest because we take them for granted. We assume that they'll always be there, and we always assume that they'll be okay. In reality, we're hurting them. Did you know John Gottman, who is a professor at the University of Washington, he and his team of researchers have discovered that 70%, get this, 70% of the arguments that you have with your spouse, you will have the entire duration of your relationship. That you'll never come to a solution on those arguments. And so the question is, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship? Anyway, James tells us, my dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I mean, I love it. James gives us an equation. He says the longer you listen, the more you'll learn, the less angry you will become. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, now, what I'm going to say here, I know is obvious again, right? But I'm going to tell you this because I so often think that it's so obvious that we forget about it. But everything that everyone does, it makes sense to them. And everything that everyone says makes sense to them. It even gets worse. I mean, and everything that everyone believes, it makes sense to them. I mean, have you ever thought about that? So whatever they say, whatever they do, whatever, it makes sense to that individual. And have you ever caught yourself, maybe you thought it or you may have even verbally said it, I don't know why they would ever say that. I don't know why in the world they would ever do that or why they would ever believe that. I don't know why. Now, let me ask you, who needs the education there? Let me give you a hint. I don't know why. Right? We need to learn more. But so often we just rather criticize. We're so quick to jump to critical conclusions. And they have a perfectly good reason for doing or saying whatever it is that they do or say. I mean, heaven forbid, my friends, heaven forbid that we actually listen and enjoy somebody who's different than us. You see, as we enter the new year, I want to challenge you. Don't make declarations. Simply ask good questions. Just slow down. Wait and be late before you speak. Remember Stephen Covey? Years ago, he had that famous book, #1 seller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Right? And that great theologian, Bob Dylan, he says it like this: don't criticize what you can't or don't understand. So don't criticize what you can't or don't understand. You see, we all have these frames of references that we use. Okay, a frame of reference is basically this set of assumptions or attitudes or criteria that we all use in order to interpret life, to make sense of the world around us. In other words, we all have these filters that we take information, and this information goes through our filters. Now, our filters can be our age, it could be our culture, our education. I mean, you get the idea? It could even be your mood, if you're in a good mood or a bad mood. And so we take this information, it goes through our filters, and then we spit out a conclusion. But James would say, no, slow down. Be quick to listen and slow to speak. Now, I mean, come on, that's good stuff, right? But I'm not done yet, because James is not done yet. James says, my dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Because. And we think we know the answer to that. Because if I do that, I'll have relational leverage, right? I'll be more convincing. If I do that, I'll get my way. James said, no, that's not the reason. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And what is human anger? Human anger is when we don't get our way. When I don't get my own way, I become frustrated. I become agitated. I become downright angry. But human anger, my friends, it does not produce the righteousness or the rightness that God desires. See, whenever we're in conflict with somebody, in reality, there's three different agendas, right? There's your agenda and your wants and your desires. There's the agenda of the person that you're in conflict with, and then there's the agenda of God. Okay, but when we argue, we like to say, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right. Isn't that kind of our attitude? And my anger produces my righteousness. I'm right. I know it, you know it, everybody knows it. But James is saying, yeah, but my right is not necessarily right. See, I think so often in our culture, we're being right at somebody. We want to be right at them. And James is saying, no. You need to be right with someone. You see, you can right somebody right out of a relationship. Now, I don't, as a dad, I can remember when my kids were young, that, if they were doing something wrong or something that wasn't all too smart, man, I would tell them about it, right? And I would just keep on keeping on. And I would just give them, and their eyes would glaze over and they weren't really paying attention. And I would just want to say, come on, why aren't you paying attention? I've got years of experience. I've lived this. And your frontal lobes are not even developed yet. I mean, why are you not listening to me? Right? Because I wasn't listening. You can right somebody right out of a relationship. And once again, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship? Jesus said in John chapter 15, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And how has Jesus loved us? He loved us sacrificially. I mean, I sit back and think about this. Jesus did not come to be right at us. I mean, if he came right to be at us, it would have taken him all of about, 2-3 seconds? He would have showed up, he would have pointed out how we're sinful, how he's holy, and then we would have been judged. No. Jesus came to be right with us. He entered into this world to suffer and die upon a cross, to make our relationship with God the Father whole and complete, to give us the gift, the assurance, without a shadow of a doubt, that we have everlasting life. So Jesus didn't come to be right at us. He came to be right with us. And my friends, that's our mission. Our mission is not to be right. Our mission is to be right or to be reconciled with God and with each other. So we need to quit being right at people and start being right with them. And I know, well, how do we do that? Well, James told us, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Because, my friends, if the two of you aren't right, it doesn't matter who's right. And so James continues. He says, therefore, get rid of all moral filth and evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. So James says, therefore, get rid of. In other words, it's like a coat. Take it off, right? Take off all moral filth. Now, the New Testament was written in Greek. And the Greek word for moral filth is kakos. It's where we get our word kaka from, right? So James is saying, take all the kaka off. And the evil, which can be translated as malice. Malice is wanting to get even with someone. Malice is wanting somebody else to hurt, just like you hurt. And James says, get rid of all of this evilness, get rid of all of this malice that is so prevalent. And it is so prevalent in our world today, isn't it? And he says, and humbly. What is humility? He calls us to be humble. Humility is we are more important than me. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking more of someone else. And he gives us this kind of Christian terminology here. He says, and humbly accept the word planted in you. In other words, what James is saying, you've already heard the word. You're already followers of Jesus. And so humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Save you for eternity, but also save you and your relationships now. quick to listen and slow to speak. My friends, don't settle for being right. Make things right. Be reconciled with one another. I'm going to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but over the last week, we celebrated the birth of Jesus. And I sit back and think, when God sent his son into the world, he didn't send him into a king's palace. He did not send him into the world as a great orator or a great preacher or philosopher. He came into the world as a baby who could not talk. He came into the world as a baby who was fully dependent on his parents, who had to flee from Herod's wrath as Herod sent his soldiers into Bethlehem in an attempt to kill him. And for decades, he just simply listened. He experienced everything we experienced. He experienced the sadness of loss. He experienced the being overwhelmed with pressure, with being overwhelmed with the pressure of Rome and being mistreated. And then finally, at the age of 30, he began to speak. For 30 years, he simply listened and experienced. And then he spoke. And when he spoke, people flocked to him. He gave them hope. He gave them peace. He gave them guidance. My friends, quick to listen and slow to speak. It will change your relationships. You have a great day. God bless and live love.